The Interstellar Academy on Velka Prime was the kind of place that made lesser worlds feel small. Its towers of blue glass rose above silver gardens, and its lecture halls were filled with the sons, daughters, heirs, and prodigies of 100 advanced civilizations. Here, future admirals studied beside royal offspring. Diplomats trained with tacticians. Security fields covered every entrance, and the faculty liked to boast that violence inside the academy was impossible. That claim died in Chamber 9. Professor Ilya was midway through a lecture on post-war diplomacy when the classroom doors slid open with a sharp mechanical hiss. Every student turned at once, expecting a late arrival. Instead, a figure in black armor stepped inside. The room froze. Tall, lean, and terrifyingly calm, the stranger wore matte plating that swallowed the light. A silver mask covered the face entirely, carved with the old symbols of mercenary guilds long thought extinct. In one hand was a compact disruptor pistol. In the other, a curved blade that shimmered like liquid metal. Professor Ilya backed away from the podium, all four hands trembling. "You are not authorized to enter this chamber." The intruder ignored him. The pistol lifted and aimed directly across the room, at Prince Kale of the Tian Dominion. Gasps burst from every corner of the classroom. Kale, heir to one of the richest empires in known space, went pale beneath his scaled skin. His personal guards were barred from lectures. No one in the room was armed. No one in the room knew what to do. The assassin's voice came through a modulator, cold and metallic. "No one moves. No one speaks. I take the prince, and the rest of you live." A student near the window whimpered. Another slid under a desk. Professor Ilya looked ready to faint. Then, from the back of the room, someone laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real one. Every head turned. There, sprawled in a reinforced chair, sat Owen Verek, the human transfer student. He had only been at the academy 3 weeks, and already everyone knew 2 things about him. First, humans came from a death world so violent that half the galaxy considered Earth a myth exaggerated by soldiers. Second, Owen never seemed impressed by anything. He brushed crumbs from his uniform and shook his head, still grinning. The assassin shifted the pistol toward him. "Explain your amusement." Owen leaned back like he was bored. "Sorry. It's just, you storm into a classroom full of teenagers like some legendary nightmare, and all I can think is that this school really overcharges for security." Several students stared at him in horror. Prince Kale mouthed, "Are you insane?" The assassin stepped closer. "You find this situation funny, human?" Owen stood slowly. Only then did most of the class realize how large he actually was. Broad shoulders, heavy frame, calm eyes. He didn't move like prey. He moved like something that had never once believed it was helpless. "A little," Owen said. "I have ended generals," the assassin said. "Warlords. Monarchs." "Yeah," Owen replied. "And now you're threatening students in a lecture hall. Feels like your career peaked early." Even the professor looked offended on the assassin's behalf. The killer raised the pistol fully, centering it on Owen's chest. "Stand down." Owen's smile widened, almost cheerful. "Nah," he said. "I'm just wondering whether you're stupid enough to pull that trigger in front of me." Silence crushed the room. For the first time since entering Chamber 9, the assassin hesitated. Owen took one step into the aisle. "You picked the wrong class," the human said. And suddenly, for reasons no one could explain, the most dangerous being in the room no longer looked like the one holding the gun. For one stretched second, no one moved. The assassin stood in the center of Chamber 9 with a disruptor aimed at Owen Verek's chest. Prince Kale remained frozen behind his desk. Professor Ilya looked as though his hearts might fail in sequence. Around them, students from 17 species huddled in terrified silence, waiting for the shot that would end the madness. Owen just stood there, relaxed. The assassin tilted the silver mask. "You are either very brave, human, or very stupid." Owen shrugged. "On my world, those are usually the same thing." A few students stared at him in disbelief. One of the smaller avian scholars whispered, "Why is he talking like this?" No one had an answer. The killer adjusted grip on the pistol. "Last warning. Kneel." Instead, Owen stepped into the aisle. It was not a dramatic move. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just one easy step forward, like a man approaching a conversation rather than a weapon. That somehow made it worse. The assassin seemed to realize it too, because the pistol's aim sharpened instantly. "You think I will hesitate?" the killer said. "No," Owen replied. "I think you already did." The shot came like a crack of blue lightning. Students screamed. But Owen moved the instant the trigger flexed. He twisted sideways with frightening speed, and the disruptor bolt tore past his ribs, smashing into the wall behind him. The blast sent molten fragments spraying across the room. Before the assassin could fire again, Owen grabbed the nearest desk and hurled it. Not pushed. Not flipped. Hurled. The heavy composite desk spun through the air like a battering ram. The assassin slashed it apart with a curved blade, but the move cost a fraction of a second. Owen was already there. He hit the armored figure like impact shock. Gasps ripped through the classroom as the assassin staggered backward. The pistol discharged again, wild this time, blasting a crater in the ceiling. Owen caught the killer's wrist with one hand and slammed it into the wall hard enough to crack the paneling. The pistol dropped to the floor. The assassin reacted instantly, driving the blade toward Owen's neck. Owen blocked with his forearm. The blade sliced cloth and skin, drawing blood. Several students cried out, but Owen barely looked at the wound. He seized the assassin's blade arm, twisted, and drove a knee into the intruder's midsection. Armor buckled with a metallic crunch. The killer stumbled, shocked less by the pain than by the force behind it. "You're stronger than the files said," the assassin growled. Owen smiled again, though his eyes had gone cold. "You brought files." The killer lunged, faster this time, striking with trained precision. A slash for the throat. A feint at the ribs. An elbow aimed at the temple. Owen avoided the first, absorbed the second, and answered the third with a brutal head, but that cracked the silver mask down one side. The sound echoed through the chamber. For the first time, the assassin lost balance. For the first time, the class saw fear. Prince Kale slowly rose from behind his desk, staring. "What is he?" Professor Ilya swallowed hard. "Human." The assassin backed toward the door, blade raised defensively now. That single change told Owen everything. The killer had entered like a hunter. Now they were retreating like prey. Owen wiped blood from his arm and took another step forward. "Here's the thing," he said quietly. "On Earth, the dangerous part isn't surviving the first hit." He cracked his knuckles. "It's what gets back up after." Then the alarms finally began to howl across the academy, and the assassin turned and ran. The moment the assassin bolted from Chamber 9, the room exploded into noise. Students shouted over one another. Professor Ilya barked for everyone to stay down. Emergency sirens finally awakened across the academy, bathing the walls in pulsing red light. But Owen Verek barely noticed any of it. He was already moving. He sprinted through the shattered doorway and into the corridor beyond. Ahead, the assassin ran with frightening speed, black armor flashing under the alarm lights. The killer shoved past panicked students and vaulted a security barrier as if it were nothing. For most pursuers, that would have been the end of the chase. For Owen, it was a warm-up. He leaped the same barrier without breaking stride. The corridor opened into the central academic concourse, a vast glass-roofed passage lined with suspended gardens, holographic directories, and polished stone walkways. Normally it was quiet, elegant, almost ceremonial. Now it was chaos. Students fled in every direction while security drones descended from ceiling hatches, shouting pre-recorded commands that no one obeyed. The assassin glanced back once. That was the mistake. Owen was closer than expected. The killer skidded around a corner into the botany atrium, and Owen followed a heartbeat later. Humid air hit him instantly. The atrium was a massive dome filled with alien plants from protected worlds, towering ferns, glowing vines, floating seed clusters drifting in controlled currents. Bridges crossed shallow pools full of things that looked decorative and probably were not. The assassin stopped at the center bridge and turned. This time there was no speech, no threats, just action. A blade flashed. Owen ducked as the curved weapon sliced through a hanging vine behind him. Luminescent sap splashed across the floor. The assassin pressed hard, slashing high, then low, driving Owen backward over the narrow bridge. The killer was fast, faster than most combat-trained soldiers Owen had seen in simulations. But Owen had grown up on Earth. Fast was relative. He caught the assassin's wrist on the third strike and rammed a shoulder into the killer's chest. The assassin staggered but spun with the momentum, driving an armored elbow into Owen's jaw. Owen's head snapped sideways. Before he could recover, a shock pellet smacked into his ribs and detonated. Blue current surged through him. Any normal student would have collapsed, twitching. Owen only grunted. The assassin's exposed eye widened behind the cracked mask. Impossible! Owen rolled his shoulder, smoke rising faintly from his uniform. You keep using that word. The killer lunged again, this time drawing a thin filament wire from the wrist gauntlet. It whipped for Owen's throat. Owen caught it with both hands an inch from his neck, the monowire biting into his palms. Blood ran down his wrists. Then he pulled. The assassin stumbled forward in surprise. Owen slammed his forehead into the killer's mask. The silver plate shattered completely. The assassin reeled backward, crashing into the bridge railing. It cracked under the weight. For one wild second both of them teetered above the pool below, where carnivorous water plants uncoiled at the vibrations. The assassin recovered first and kicked Owen square in the chest. Owen fell into the water. A dozen students watching from behind sealed atrium doors screamed. The killer limped toward the service exit, thinking it was over. Then the pool erupted. Owen surged up out of the water, soaked and furious, one of the snapping aquatic vines wrapped around his fist like a living rope. He hurled it. The plant struck the assassin across the back and coiled instantly, thorned tendrils locking around the armor. The killer hit the floor hard. Owen climbed out of the pool, breathing steadily, blood and water dripping from his sleeves. The alarms wailed. Security drones finally surrounded the dome from above. But Owen never took his eyes off the assassin. "You should have stayed in the classroom," he said. And the chase was no longer about escape. It was about whether the assassin could survive the human who was coming for him. The assassin tore free of the living vine with a snarl and sprinted through the botany atrium service hatch before the security drones could seal it. Owen followed without hesitation, boots hammering against the metal corridor as alarms screamed overhead. Red emergency lights flashed across the walls, turning the Academy's polished architecture into something that looked more like a warship under attack. Ahead, the killer moved with desperate speed now. That told Owen everything. In Chamber 9, the assassin had been calm, theatrical, in control. In the atrium, they had been efficient. But here, racing through maintenance tunnels toward the private transit wing, every movement carried urgency. The hunter was gone. Only prey ran like that. Owen burst through another door and entered the transit concourse just in time to see the assassin drop from a balcony to the launch deck below. Beyond the reinforced glass, the night sky over Velka Prime shimmered violet, streaked with distant traffic from orbital lanes. 3 sleek shuttles sat on the deck, engines dormant, except for one. A black courier craft was already powering up. "So that's the plan," Owen muttered, wiping blood from his hand onto his torn sleeve. Classroom hit, dock escape, disappear into traffic. The assassin glanced up, saw him on the balcony, and fired a compact pistol. Owen dropped flat as the shot carved molten metal from the railing. He rolled, came up running, and vaulted over the side rather than take the stairs. He hit the lower deck hard, stumbled once, then kept going. The killer reached the shuttle ramp. 2 armed accomplices emerged from the craft, startled to see the target's pursuer still alive. One raised a pulse rifle. The other drew a shock baton and rushed forward. The baton wielder got there first. He swung high. Owen stepped inside the strike, caught the attacker's wrist, and drove an elbow into the side of the helmet. The armored accomplice folded instantly. Owen ripped the baton free and hurled it end over end at the rifleman. It struck the second accomplice in the throat just as the pulse rifle fired, sending the shot wild into the ceiling. The rifle clattered away. Owen didn't even slow. The assassin reached the top of the ramp and turned, aiming the pistol with both hands this time. The cracked remains of the silver mask were gone, revealing a narrow, scarred face and one furious amber eye. "You should have died in the classroom," the assassin hissed. Owen kept advancing. "You should have picked a school without humans." The pistol fired twice. Owen veered left. One bolt missed. The second grazed his shoulder, burning through cloth and flesh. He grimaced but kept moving. The assassin fired again, but Owen grabbed the fallen rifleman by the armor and yanked the body into the line of fire. The blast struck the deck beside them, showering sparks. That bought 1 second. Owen used it. He charged up the ramp and slammed into the assassin just as the killer tried to retreat into the shuttle. Both of them crashed against the inner bulkhead. The pistol spun away. The assassin drew a hidden blade from the forearm and stabbed for Owen's ribs. Owen trapped the wrist with both hands, muscles bunching, and forced the blade sideways until it screeched harmlessly across the wall. The assassin was strong. Owen was stronger. With a growl, Owen smashed the killer into the bulkhead once, twice, then ripped the blade clean from the gauntlet and flung it across the cabin. Outside, security forces finally flooded the launch deck, and with them came Prince Kale. The young royal stopped dead at the bottom of the ramp, staring at the blood, the unconscious accomplices, and the human fighting inside the shuttle like he belonged in a battlefield, not a classroom. Around Kale, guards took aim but hesitated. No one had a clean shot. Inside the craft, the assassin's eyes flicked toward the prince. That tiny glance was all Owen needed. He smiled through blood and smoke. "Bad move," he said, and he hit the assassin hard enough to send both of them crashing through the cockpit hatch. The cockpit hatch burst inward under the force of Owen's tackle. He and the assassin slammed into the shuttle's control compartment in a rain of broken panels and sparks. Warning lights erupted across the instrument displays. Outside, security officers shouted for everyone to clear the launch lane, but inside the craft, it had come down to something much simpler. One killer. One human. The assassin recovered first, rolling across the deck and snatching an emergency sidearm from beneath the pilot console. The weapon came up fast, aimed straight at Owen's face. But Owen had already seen the movement. He kicked the assassin's wrist just as the trigger pulled. The shot blasted through the cockpit canopy instead, spiderwebbing the glass with glowing fractures. Atmosphere alarms shrieked instantly. Wind roared through the cabin as pressure began to bleed away. The assassin scrambled back, breathing hard now, amber eye wide with rage and disbelief. "Why won't you stay down?" Owen rose slowly, blood on his sleeve, burn marks across one shoulder, throat bruised from the garrote, and a fresh cut still leaking from his forearm. Yet somehow he still looked like the most dangerous thing in the room. "Because," he said, voice rough, "you came into my class." The assassin lunged with the pistol like a club. Owen blocked, caught the attacker by the collar and arm, and hurled them across the cockpit. The killer smashed into the damaged console. A spray of sparks lit the scarred face in brief blue flashes. Still, the assassin kept fighting. A hidden shock spike snapped from the wrist and drove into Owen's side. Current ripped through him. His body jerked, teeth clenched, muscles locking for a heartbeat. The assassin shoved forward, trying to force him down. Outside the shuttle, Prince Cale stood at the bottom of the ramp with security troops around him. Through the broken hatch he could see the struggle, hear the metal groaning, hear the human growl through the pane instead of scream. Then Owen did something Cale would remember for the rest of his life. He grabbed the assassin's shock-wired arm, ignored the electricity tearing through him, and squeezed. Armor crumpled. Bone cracked. The assassin cried out and dropped the spike. Owen slammed the killer face first into the console, then turned and drove them through the pilot's chair so hard it tore free from the floor. The cockpit went still except for alarms. The assassin tried to rise one last time. Owen planted a boot on the killer's chest and looked down, breathing hard but steady. "You're done." Security teams finally stormed the shuttle. Shock restraints snapped over the assassin's wrists, ankles, and throat. The two accomplices outside were already secured. Medics rushed forward, but for several seconds no one touched Owen. No one seemed entirely certain whether he was finished fighting. Prince Cale stepped into the cabin, his voice quiet. "You saved my life." Owen glanced at him, then at the ruined cockpit around them. "Yeah. Sorry about the classroom." Cale stared, then let out a stunned laugh he clearly had not planned. It spread to a few trembling officers nearby. The impossible tension broke all at once. By the next day, the entire academy knew the story. A legendary assassin had entered Chamber 9 to claim a prince. Instead, he had found a human Deathworlder with a bad attitude, fast reflexes, and absolutely no respect for dramatic entrances. Classes resumed 2 days later. Chamber 9 had a new reinforced wall, 3 more security fields, and a fresh scorch mark no one had managed to remove. When Owen walked in late, every student turned to stare. Professor Ilya adjusted his notes with shaking hands. "Mr. Varek," he said carefully, "please try not to fight anyone during today's lecture." Owen dropped into his seat, opened his slate, and shrugged. "No promises, Professor." And from then on, whenever new students asked why humans were classified as Deathworlders, the older ones all gave the same answer. Because if death walks into the room. They looked toward Owen. Humans laugh first.